reason. All right. So, I'm Jeff Cobb. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Education Trust Midwest. And we have Jen Daniil here as well. So we're going to sort of co-present on this. Uh, so just as a little bit of background, who we are. So we are a nonprofit that is driven by data, and what that we use the data for is to work on closing achievement and opportunity gaps. We know that a lot of students who have been ignored for the better part of the last, several years have not gotten the resources they need. We're trying to figure out a better way to provide resources for those students. And so this would fall in, like, students from low-income backgrounds, English learners, students with disabilities, uh, even students living in rural areas. They tend to have their own issues as well. We're going to focus tonight on students from low-income backgrounds. As Perry mentioned, we're also part of the Michigan Partnership for Equity and Opportunity. And this coalition started right during the pandemic. And what brought the groups together was sort of this need to figure out, how do we fund Michigan schools more equitably? How do we go from sort of the one-size-fits-all approach to targeting dollars based on student needs? And it's a really diverse group. We have, Republicans, Democrats, we have grassroots activists, we have like business leaders and statewide organizations, et cetera. We're in 28 counties. We have, and our reach is over 1 million students in Michigan. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty great group of people to work with. And Perry obviously is a part of that. And so we really appreciate her. This is just a list of all the different organizations that are part of it. So what we're going to start out kind of just sort of setting the table with really what's been a really disappointing story over the last 30 years. Now going back to 1995, I guess. Between 1995 and 2015, we had some of the worst investment in education revenue growth. Michigan State University did a study on it. We ranked, lower than, I think, in almost any other state. And what drove that, I guess that could be up for debate. But the problem is, how do we get out of the hole that was dug by underinvesting in students for such a long time? And even with that, we look at 2006 and then 2008 with the recession. And so we've never really been able to get back to where we were in the early 90s. And the lack of investment, it's compounded over time. And so if you were to go back and sort of figure out how much we would be spending if we were still investing what we had done in 2006 versus 2016, you would have seen about $22 billion more invested in K-12 between 2016 and 2021. That's a huge number. And you can start to see, what could you think of all the things that could be done with those dollars and how you could really make an impact with students. And yet, because we chose not to invest and we kind of continued down that path, that money never appeared. And so we've really done a disservice to our students, and particularly to those students, like I mentioned, students from low-income backgrounds. So Section 31A, so that's just kind of a wonky way to refer to what a lot of people call at-risk funding. It's a section in the school aid budget, and it's to be eligible for school districts to receive this money. They have to comply with the Read by Grade 3 law, which was passed several years ago, trying to make sure that every student knows how to read by grade 3. They have to use this additional dollars towards early literacy and numeracy. And they also have to include a multi-tiered system of support for all grades. And so for those who don't understand that, basically what that means is, when you have a student that is struggling, you can kind of give general classroom support. you can put them in. Then if they still need additional help, then you go to a second tier and you give them sort of like small group support. And then if they still are struggling, you can give them one-on-one supports, et cetera. And so that's really important to how they use Section 31A dollars. So the funding is intended to address early literacy and numeracy and ensure that students are proficient in the English language arts by end of grade 3 so that they can read by grade 3 at the right level, that they're on track and proficient in math by the end of 8th grade, that they attend school regularly. We know that truancy is just a huge problem right now. And it was, there was definitely truancy before the pandemic, but the pandemic really exacerbated the amount of truancy. And then also to make sure that high school students are college and career ready when they graduate. So those are what that's for. So the way they determine who gets how districts get this funding is it's based on the number of economically disadvantaged students. So and how do you define that? These are students who are eligible for free and reduced school lunches. They live in a household that's receiving some kind of assistance, either SNAP or at TANF. Homeless students, migrant students, and students living in foster care. So if you're a school district and you have one of these students, you get a little bit extra on top of your foundation allowance. And these are just some of the programs that districts can spend the money on. So they can spend on instructional programs, non-instructional programs like mental health and counseling, school health clinics, and they can hire coaches. They can help students who are, being bullied or deal with crisis intervention programs. They can hire support staff that serves at-risk students. And again, they can implement that multi-tiered system of support. And districts with poverty rates above 50%, they can use it for security measures. Just, not always a great thing, but it is an option for them to do that. And then also districts with high concentrations of poverty can use whole school interventions. So in other words, if you have such a significant amount of poverty, you can basically say, hey, we know that most of the kids in this classroom are going to be, are going to need extra resources, and you can use a whole school approach. So just a brief history. So this will kind of show you, if you look at the dotted line, that is the number of eligible students that we consider economically disadvantaged. And this section started in 1995, and originally every school was going to get an additional 11.5% of whatever the foundation allowance was. They would get that, they call it a weight, would get that on top of their foundation allowance. For every student, you get 11.5%. And you'll see for the first, I don't know, 7-8 years, they were able to do that. But then what you'll see down at the bottom, there's like a light or a dark blue and then sort of a dotted light blue. And what the dotted light blue is how much they were supposed to be receiving at this 11.5% weight. And the blue is like how much the state was actually investing. And so you can see, again, through, 06, 07, all the way up through 2022, we never actually got to that 11.5% weight. And just to put that into perspective, 11.5% is actually one of the lower weights when you look at how other states do it. So even though we had sort of a low rate, we still weren't even fully funding it. So, fast forward to go back, I guess, to 2023, and we finally got it funded at the 11.5%. And then last year we implemented something called an opportunity index and kind of increased the amount of weights. And we will get to all that later on, but I just want to just sort of give you a history and background of how we got here. Jen, do you want to take over on the concentrated poverty?
I will, yes. So one of the big questions that I think it's important to ask is, why do we need to worry about concentrated poverty? in Michigan? And the answer is that Michigan has actually, for a very long time now, had one of the highest rates of concentrated poverty in the country. And what we mean by concentrated poverty is really that you have communities where lots of the people living in the community are coming from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. So as opposed to having poverty that's like, distributed across the state, you have concentrated pockets of it in different parts of Michigan. And as Jeff was just talking about, Section 31A up until last year did not account for concentrated poverty, right? It was just that 11.5% was the additional weight that school districts got for every child coming from an economically disadvantaged background, regardless of the concentration of poverty. Go on to the next slide. And that's a problem because we know from both research and practice, right, that children who learn in districts with particularly high concentrations of poverty face additional challenges in their education. And consequently, they then require more resources. So some of these additional challenges, really obviously, they have fewer resources, right, than wealthier school districts. They also tend to have less experienced teachers. They have higher teacher turnover on average. And these students also tend to have increased exposure to environmental hazards and safety concerns within the learning environments. So these are just some of the things that then require these districts to have additional resources. And one thing that we focused on in our annual report, Brown's Hope, Fulfilling the Promise in Michigan, that just came out earlier this year, we were focusing in kind of specifically on the distribution of teachers across the state. So what you see in the chart here is the distribution of inexperienced versus experienced teachers by opportunity index band. So on the left side of the chart, you have opportunity index band 1, which these are the districts with the lowest concentrations of poverty, right? So see, there's some of the wealthier districts in the state. All the way over to opportunity band 6 on the right side, these are the districts with the highest concentrations of poverty in the state. In band 6, the concentration of poverty ranges from 85% up to 100% of the students in the district. Looking at the bars, the yellow bars represent teachers who are in their first year of teaching, and the blue bars represent teachers with 10 years or more of experience. And we can see a pretty obvious pattern here, right? In Opportunity Index Band 1, those wealthiest districts in the state, almost half of the teachers in those districts have more than 10 years of experience. And brand new teachers only represent about 16% of the teacher workforce in those districts. And then you can see that the percentage of experienced teachers starts to decline the further we go up the opportunity index, and the rate of inexperienced teachers increases until we get to band 6, where at this point now a third of the teachers in band 6 are in their first year of teaching, and less than a quarter of the teachers in band 6 have more than 10 years of experience. And we know that teachers are on average more effective the longer they work as teachers. And so this is extremely problematic in that we're looking at these districts that are hiring, that these students who are already facing some of the greatest challenges are also learning from teachers who are on average less effective than their peers. So we're seeing just compounding challenges happening here. And I do see the question, I'm going to come back to it. Okay. So how do we address this? Well, in this last year, for fiscal year 24, the state legislature made a historic change to the way that Michigan schools are funded, investing more in students who are underserved based on the concentration of poverty in the district. And I've already previewed this. I didn't think about this when I organized the slides this way, that I've already talked to you about the opportunity index bands. Okay. But it's all right. We're going to go back and make sure we all got that learning. Okay. So this historic school funding win really, as Jeff and Perry were saying, comes as a direct result of 3+ years of advocacy and engagement and talking to legislators and getting the word out about why this is important. And it is a huge win, a momentous win for Michigan students, but there is still more to do. So let's keep talking. So the new opportunity index, in terms of kind of big picture, it makes Michigan one of the first 10 states in the country to use an index to account for concentrations of poverty. And that's among states that have similar funding structures to us, right? It invests much more in students who are attending public school districts with greater levels of poverty, regardless of region in Michigan. So, and that's going to become important. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. In the immediate term, the opportunity index is driving more than $950 million, so almost $1 billion this year, which is $200 million more dollars than we had in this line item last year, to the public education of students who qualify for at-risk funding in this current school budget. One of the really cool things about the way they wrote the law, though, is that the opportunity index is written in such a way that there are goals in statute that we're aspiring to. And once we meet those goals, we will be investing at least $2.9 billion annually in the education of students from low income backgrounds. So you can see we're on our way, but we're not there, right? So when it's fully funded, the opportunity index will drive weights of about 35% up to 47%, depending on the band. So 35% is the lowest weight once the opportunity index is fully funded. And 47% is the highest weight. So that 47%, that represents 4 times more than what these kids were getting under the previous model before the opportunity index existed, right? So it is a big deal. You can see, though, that for fiscal year 24, remember I said that that line item is currently about $950 million. So that is not enough to fully fund the opportunity index. So what you're seeing in the final column there on the right side, these are the prorated weights for this year. So you can see they range from that 11.53, and that was to make sure that no one was getting less this year than they got the year before. So we're starting at that 11.53 and going up to 15.33%. That doesn't sound like much, but we're going to look at a couple of real examples to show like how much more money we're talking about in terms of real dollars. But worth noting that there is still quite a bit more to do. We're only funded to about 31% of the opportunity index's potential right now. So that continued advocacy to get it fully funded is really important. Let's go on. Okay, so I talked about how the opportunity index is benefiting kids all over the state. And because one of the things, I think one of the myths that we had to kind of address as we were talking about the opportunity index was that this was just a handout for certain districts in the state. And that is really not true. What we're seeing is that actually when it's fully funded, towns and suburban areas like Kalkaska and Ypsi receive the largest share of the pie, followed by small and mid-sized cities like Grand Rapids and Warren, then rural areas like Whitefish Township and Mansalona, way up here. And then finally, large urban areas like Detroit. So let's go to the next slide and we can look at kind of the pie chart here. So you can see that once we get to that full $2.9 billion, almost half of it, $1.5 billion, is going to suburban and town districts. And this is really hearkening back to what we talked about, or what I started talking about when I first came on here, is that we have concentrated poverty all over the state. It is not just a Detroit problem, right? It is not just a Grand Rapids problem. It is everywhere. And so a really important message about the opportunity index is that it is benefiting all kinds of kids all over the state of Michigan. And it also really speaks to how we have been underinvesting in these kids for such a long time. We have kids with additional needs all over the state, and the opportunity index is what we need to ensure that they're getting what they need to thrive and be successful here in Michigan for the future. Let's go on. Okay. So this is just another way of looking at kind of what I was just saying, right? That once the opportunity index is fully funded, it is going to benefit kids all over the state of Michigan. So you can see the kind of darkest burnt orange. I don't know. I haven't looked at a Crayola box in so long. I don't have a creative name for what that might be. But back in the early 90s, I think we would have called it burnt orange. So if you're looking for that darkest color there, you can see it. Yep, there's some in Southeast Michigan. There's some in Southwest Michigan. There's some up here in kind of this area, some up north, and even a couple up in the Upper Peninsula, right? We see these high concentrations of poverty everywhere in all regions of the state of Michigan. And so in order to achieve its true potential, though, we have to fund it. So that's what the Opportunity for All campaign is all about, right? This is a campaign we are launching at Ed Trust Midwest, saying that, this really is about all kids. And so we're going to ask you at the end of the presentation to kind of sign our fair funding pledge and help to make these asks to your legislators. But I wanted to show you just a little bit for this tool so you can kind of see what it does and what's in the website.
Do I need
So
to stop my sharing
you
so that you
may
can show
have to, yeah,
yourself?
you have to, it may let me take it away from you. Let me see.
Okay.
Let's just this guy share. I can wrest control away.
Here you go.
Okay, so This is, and I'm gonna look over to my side because of the screen that I'm sharing. But this is the opportunity for all. This is the opportunity for all website. So what we've done here is that we've created a whole set of storytelling here that you can use in your advocacy, right? So there's a whole kind of hope for our future and our vision for Michigan. What do we imagine for the state? We talk about, there's a whole page talking about, I won't go through all this, but there's a whole page on Michigan status quo. A lot of that we have talked about tonight, but you can see more detail there. We also talk about leading lessons from a leading state, and we've really highlighted Massachusetts here because the Opportunity Index is modeled off of what Massachusetts did in 2019 with their Student Opportunity Act. And you'll see if you go to that page that their weights are a lot higher. And that's what we're aspiring to over time, right? Getting to these truly transformational weights. And so, but the really cool thing about this website is that you can see the impact of the Opportunity Index on your districts. So if we click on our little Find Your District tool here, and this was loading a little slow earlier, so hopefully it's loading a little faster now. All right, so we have your Find Your District tool. I'm going to see if I can make that a smidge bigger. Okay, so over here under district name, there's all the school districts and charter schools in Michigan. So we can start with IPSI. So what you can see is that over here on the far left, this is how much money per student, and this is not per student from a low-income background, this is overall per student in Ypsilanti Public Schools, additional funding you're getting through the current prorated opportunity index. So the total per pupil funding on average is about $10,471. If you'll recall, the foundation allowance right now is $9,608. So you're getting about $800 more per child. When the opportunity index is fully funded, the blue bar here in the middle shows that that number goes up by almost $2,000 per student. So going up to just over $12,000. And if we were to go to a truly transformational model like Massachusetts, their weights range from 40% at the bottom up to 100% at the top. That number goes even higher to almost $15,000 per child. So this is the first page you can see. You can also hit this little blue button that says total district funding. And this is a very cool chart. So it shows there's a few things here. The first that I want to call your attention to is this little red dash line at the bottom. This is pre-opportunity index. This was in fiscal year 23 when we did finally fully fund that 11.5% weight, but we weren't accounting for concentrations of poverty. That year, Ypsilanti Community Schools received about $2.6 million in 31A funding. Opportunity Index was implemented at that prorated level. It goes up to about $3.2 million, about a $600 million or $600,000 increase this year. Once the Opportunity Index is fully funded, suddenly it goes from 3.2 up to almost $10 million a year. So we're not talking about, shaking out the couch cushions. Like, it's real money. And then if we were to go to a truly transformational model, it goes even higher, looking at almost $20 million a year. So this is just a way to kind of get an at-a-glance idea of thinking about, what could your community do with this kind of funding for these students? How many more mental health supports could we provide? What kind of interventions could we be providing? What could that look like? So that's what we're kind of inviting you to imagine with us tonight. Jeff, I'll hand it back over to you. I will stop sharing. I can figure out how. There we go. And we'll finish the presentation, then we'll take any questions or.
Yeah, let me pull this up real quick. Okay. So here's what we're asking the legislature to do right now is to commit to fully funding the Opportunity Index over a period of 5 years. And what we're asking for is them to invest an additional $500 million in the index, beginning with this year's budget, and keep adding an additional $500 million every year until it's fully funded. And you'll see here, I wanted to give you sort of an update in terms of how things look right now. So in the governor's proposed budget, she had a very modest increase of $23.8 million. The House has a $70 million increase, and then the Senate is the biggest increase at $122 million. And so while $122 million seems like a pretty significant number, But when you compare it to the we would need 500 million to fully fund it over 5 years, you can start to see where if all we're doing is just funding it at 122 million or even less than that, it's gonna take forever to fully, you know, get up to the level of funding that we really need for these students. So ways you can get involved, we would encourage you to contact your local legislators, and urge them to support fully funding the index. Um, even though a lot of these legislators voted for it last year, it was in the budget, they supported it, they still don't really understand it. And they certainly don't understand the magnitude. In fact, there was one that was a senator was like, "Hey, didn't we solve this last time? I thought we were done with this." Well, no, that was just the beginning. So you need to kind of educate them. Again, you can visit our that website, opportunityforallmichigan.org, and you can look at your local. You can read more about what happened in Massachusetts. You can read more about our own state funding history, and then you can see the impact on your local school district. And then you can become an advocate and sign the Fair Funding Pledge, and there's a button right on the website for that. So.